Millions of people like us are the reason this is happening right now. We'll be tormented by it for a long time. I will be.
I think the one thing I'm learning in this job and in this world is really not to put faith in people.
I think that when someone says that they were wrong about anything, we should normalize providing positive reinforcement for that.
Good morning, Piers. So good to see you again. Where are your manners, Piers? You're supposed to introduce me correctly.
As what? You don't have any cards, Donald Trump famously told President Zelensky. You're not in a good position. Well, now it's the US president who appears to have folded. Trump last night extended the Iran ceasefire indefinitely. The bombing will stop, quote, until such time as the Iranians have agreed on their proposal. And to be clear, anybody who's against this war or any war should be glad about that. The problem for the president is that he has very little to show for the lost lives and the $60 billion impact on the US economy. Iran attacked 3 ships in the Hormuz Strait today. The US blockade of Iranian ships continues. And what all of this means in practice is that gas prices are at the highest point in years, and inflation is now higher than before Trump returned to office. His approval rating is inevitably heading in the wrong direction. And yesterday, with the clock ticking on the first ceasefire, Trump raised the stakes.
You're saying that you need at least the prospects for a signed deal today and tomorrow, or else you would resume bombing Iran.
Well, I expect to be bombing because I think that's a better attitude to go in with, but we're ready to go.
It looks a lot like Iran called Trump's bluff. We can argue about the justification for war and about what, if anything, has been achieved. But the fact is the president's position is weakened by the fact he clearly wants out of this. He's betting that Iran won't be able to suffer the prolonged financial pain of a US blockade. They're betting that they can tough it out for longer than a president who needs an off-ramp. And as long as they can turn off a fifth of the world's oil supply like a bathroom tap, they're probably right. Iran said today that the ceasefire means nothing and is probably the pretext for a surprise attack. The most chilling fact is that they don't seem to care if it is. Iran's leaders are clearly prepared for their country to take a beating. They're clearly in no danger of being removed, and they clearly don't care much about the lives of their own people. In Trump terms, that means they're holding quite a lot of cards. If you plan for the worst, if you can live with the worst, the good will always take care of itself, a wise man once said. That man was Donald Trump in The Art of the Deal. Well, first up, I'm joined by Republican Senator for Kentucky, Rand Paul. Senator Paul, welcome back to Uncensored.
Thanks for having me.
I really can't get my head around what is happening with this war now because of all the conflicting incendiary rhetoric on all sides and the kind of reality check we're seeing with our own eyes. What do you think is happening, and how does this now play out?
Well, I think it's a war of choice. So a war of choice I'd like to end as quickly as possible. I'd like to get our soldiers out of harm's way. I'd like to remove the onerous changes that have come to our economy because of this war. And so the sooner the better for me. But I think it's important to know that if you want to stop a war, it's important to know how your enemy reacts. So, for example, we have completely defeated them in every military aspect of a war. They have no control of the air, no control of the seas, and really we can do as we wish with our bombing campaign. But people have to look back in history and see, well, what will people do in that kind of situation? And I think one useful historical example to look back is at Japan. Towards the end of World War II, we'd had 400,000 soldiers die. We weren't going to quit quickly. We decided to drop 2 atomic weapons. We dropped one on Hiroshima. 3 or 4 days later on Nagasaki. Hundreds of thousands of people died. But when the imperial cabinet came together, most of them still wanted to continue the war. Finally, the emperor spoke up, and it was unusual for the emperor to speak. And the emperor spoke first without anyone asking a question and said, enough's enough. We're going to stop the war. But even in that utter defeat, there were people who wanted to fight on. So I think it's not really out of the question that the Iranians, even though they're utterly defeated, would fight on. So when you come to a diplomatic solution, you can continue to berate your enemy, you continue to belittle them, you can offer that you will obliterate their civilization or destroy their religion or mock their religion, but that's not a good way to actually get them to come to a diplomatic end to the war. And it's unlikely it'll be an unconditional surrender like the Japanese did after 2 atomic weapons. I think unconditional surrender is really off the table. But if there's stuff we still want, which would actually be good, like let's say they gave up their enriched uranium, that'd be a good result to a negotiation. But they're probably not going to do that just because of the military defeat. They're probably going to want something in return. So then you get to an actual negotiation. They're going to want some of their money freed up that's been frozen by the banking system. They may want relief of sanctions. And I'm actually a big believer that you should trade relief of sanctions for better behavior. Sanctions don't tend to work when you put them on a country. We have hundreds of sanctions on China and there's no effect. Hundreds of sanctions on Russia, no effect. But I do believe in removing them and trading removal for an action that you want, that you actually can get benefit from removing sanctions. So I'm for real negotiations. I'm for removing sanctions if you get verifiable changes. Removal of the enriched uranium should be worth a lot, really, to opening trade with Iran, if they would actually agree to export or have some sort of third neutral country take it. But the bottom line is I'd just like to see meaningful negotiations, and I'd like to see an end to the war as soon as possible.
The question of the enriched uranium seems pretty crucial to all this, because for Donald Trump to have any kind of off-ramp now, which looks like a victory, he would have to persuade the American people that his now declared main mission, which was to stop Iran developing a nuclear weapon, had been achieved. The only way to, I think, do that convincingly is to actually have the enriched uranium handed over or destroyed, and to be provably destroyed. But if you're the Iranians, I'm not sure there's any real incentive to do that. And they can now use the Strait of Hormuz and, of course, their highly effective attacks on their Gulf state neighbors. They can do that anytime they'd like to put more pressure back on Donald Trump, who is facing already a lot of economic and political pressure himself the longer this goes on. So I just don't understand how that happens, how the enriched uranium gets, I don't think they're going to surrender it. And how does America, or the Israelis as well, how do they get their hands on it without committing huge numbers of ground forces, which I don't think has any political appetite for that in America, given the way the polling is right now?
It becomes harder to declare victory if they retain the enriched uranium and the regime stays in power. And, last year, the Trump administration declared victory. They said we had obliterated their nuclear potential. And now they're saying, oh, no, they're still only 1 week away. So I think they're going to have to achieve something through the negotiations, either removal of the enriched uranium, because really this deal will also be made, and this deal will have critics. Even further to the right, those who really are in the perpetual war camp will say, well, you're negotiating with people who are unreliable. How are you going to verify this? How are you going to trust but verify and make sure the agreement is adhered to? So it isn't as simple as people make it out to be. You have to have inspectors on the ground. You have to bring back the international atomic inspectors. So there's a lot that has to go on. But all I can say is my hope still is for peace. My hope is for a resolution to this. For many, many reasons, but it's not an easy way to do it. But I can say that any members of the administration that are using apocalyptic religious terms to describe the war are making a big mistake. I mean, a country of 90 million people who are almost entirely Islamic faith, to mock Allah or to talk about Old Testament ways we're going to smite our enemy or made up Pulp Fiction passages are probably not good ways once you get to the talking phase. And we are in the talking phase. And we will always be able to win the military phase. We won the military phase. We can continue to win. But really, short of ground troops, you're going to have to negotiate. And it means understanding your enemy, accepting exactly who they are, but also understanding that some people believe that the people now in charge are actually more radical than the people that were killed.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, you've got the Supreme Leader's son is now the new Supreme Leader. Clearly, he's been wounded, so we haven't seen him. But given he lost half his family in the initial strikes, it's hard to believe he wouldn't be more hardline and radical than perhaps even his father was. And the IRGC appears to still have a very tight grip on the country, because we've seen no uprisings whatsoever from the Iranian people. Partly, of course, they don't want to get bombed, but also there seems to be no belief on their part at the moment that such an uprising would lead to anything other than mass deaths, as we saw back in January when they protested. If you were advising President Trump right now, I get the sense, looking at him and the conflicting positions he's taking, that he's desperate to try and get out of this but in a way that looks like he can claim a victory. What is the best way for him to do that, do you think, quickly?
You know, I think when you're leading up to a war, expressing how much we can do in damage is potentially a deterrent or an inducement to negotiate. Once we've already shown that we can damage and the damage has already occurred, I don't know that reminding them is doing much, because, see, we've won the military phase. Now from the diplomatic phase is about sitting face to face with your enemy or adversary and actually understanding that at home they will have to save face. And so if you and I are negotiating, I don't start out by saying you're ugly and your tie is terrible and your studio is bad. I would probably start out with a compliment before I tried to ask you for something. And that's the way negotiations work. It has to be on a more, I can't complain about your tie, you don't have a tie on, but it would have to be more of a conciliatory sort of conversation, and that's where we should be. And that doesn't involve words like ending the civilization, obliterating a people, bombing you back into the Stone Age. We kind of already have done that, and we've shown we have the might to do it. I don't think we have to brag about it anymore. At this point, we're in the diplomatic phase, and that really involves understanding that the leadership who's going to negotiate with you potentially has problems at home if they look too weak in the negotiations. We want something out of it. What is the main thing we want? It seems to me that the main victory of the diplomatic part of this war would be the removal of the highly enriched uranium. If you had that, a promise not to enrich, and then some sort of regime that is an international regime that is periodically in Iran to check for enrichment, I think those would be big victories. But Iran's probably not giving that up unless they get something in return, either relief of sanctions that lets them sell their oil.
Senator Rand Paul, I'm sorry, I interrupted you there. I just want to thank you very much indeed for coming back onto Uncensored. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Well, we'll debate all this with my panel in a moment, but let's hear now from the Republican Congresswoman for Colorado, Lauren Boebert. Welcome back, Congresswoman. How are you?
I'm doing great, Pierce. I feel bad for bumping Senator Rand Paul. I'm sure he has a lot more intelligent things that your audience would like to hear, but we have some fights here in the House as well.
Well, all voices are welcome, as you know, on Uncensored. I wanted to start this interview with you by playing an apology from Tucker Carlson. Let's take a listen.
So looking back, because I mean, you and I and everyone else who supported him, you wrote speeches for him, I campaigned for him. I mean, we're implicated in this for sure.
Yes.
It's not enough to say, well, I changed my mind, or like, oh, this is bad, I'm out. It's like in very small ways, but in real ways, you and me and millions of people like us are the reason this is happening right now.
Yes.
So I do think it's like a moment to wrestle with our own consciences. You know, we'll be tormented by it for a long time. I will be.
Now, Congresswoman, on April 24th, 2023, you posted on X, wherever Tucker Carlson goes, America will follow. Thank you for being one of the greatest and most powerful voices in the conservative movement. Can't wait to see what's next. Did you anticipate that what would come next would be a very long apology for supporting Donald Trump?
I think the one thing I'm learning in this job and in this world is really not to put faith in people and not to be so definitive on opinions of people because they change all the time. People's opinions have certainly changed on me. My opinions have changed on you, Pierce. I think you're wonderful. But you know, I understand. Yes, I understand what Tucker Carlson is feeling and saying, and those are his beliefs. He has, you know, has a sense of betrayal by the president personally from the attacks that have come out, from the rhetoric that has been said. And he's not alone there. There have been many others in that list, and even a member of Congress who resigned because of the words that he said. But I do not regret my vote for President Trump. I do not believe we would have America to defend if Kamala Harris would have won. There would have been endless wars throughout the world, and I don't think that we would even be winning them, and we certainly wouldn't have the victories at home. I don't like getting involved in the Middle East talks. President Trump has, he has a track record of using our military wisely and not getting bogged down in forever wars, and I do believe that he has an intent to solve this. And just look at his first term. But that said, I feel like, this is already dragging on, and I want to focus on the issues here at home. And that includes just not going after these topics of, who is mad at who and who hurt whose feelings. I could have reasons to have my feelings hurt every single day, even by my own remarks and my own self. But I stepped up to lead and to solve problems for Colorado and the rest of our country. And that's what I'm going to continue to be focused on.
Right. I mean, it seems to me what's very interesting about the split in the conservative right in America is that many on the conservative right do feel let down, that President Trump, having campaigned so vociferously that he would not take America into these pointless, expensive wars, particularly in the Middle East, then takes America into the biggest potential war in the Middle East, which is with Iran, of a country of 90 million people. And people are scratching their heads going, how does that square with America first? And when you see that the polling shows that most Americans don't agree with this war, 1 in 4 Republicans don't agree with this war, most Americans would like the president to get on with focusing, as you've just said, on domestic issues. They're scratching their heads going, why did he do this? And it looks to me, I may be proven wrong, I hope I am, but it looks to me like the president wants to get out of this now, but can't see an easy way to do that doesn't look like pulling out and surrendering.
Yes, well, if anyone has listened to President Trump's remarks from decades ago, even, he has always said that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, and that he would do anything in his power to prevent that. And so it's no surprise that he is taking this action against Iran to ensure that they do not have a nuclear weapon. But also, I do understand, he is the leader of the free world, and really he is a world leader. So there are other issues that come up. Just look at Congress. I don't want to be battling and exposing creeps and pedophiles as my job. That's not exactly what I signed up and stepped up to do. I said that I was going to deliver water and infrastructure projects for Colorado. I was going to secure your constitutional rights. I was going to empower parents to raise their own children. And, here I am dealing with scumbags in Washington, D.C. and forcing expulsions and or forcing resignations and threatening expulsions. And that's really, it's part of the job, but it's not why I'm here. So there are definitely things that come up that aren't a total campaign focus. But as long as we have a good outcome and good governance in between, I think that we could come out of this victoriously. And I would put a lot of pressure on the House of Representatives to do our job. We have FISA coming up. I want to protect Fourth Amendment rights here to prevent your government, our government, from illegally spying on you. And so that's another one of my focuses here. And, every day you're just juggling many things and many policy issues and topics and hoping to get the best outcome on all of them.
You said that you think Congress has a sex problem. Let's take a look at what you said.
Go to church, find Jesus. Why is everybody so horny here?
Oh, you missed the best part, Pierce.
What was the best part?
Well, they were asking what is the resolve here? How do we prevent this activity from going on? I said, well, I think we have a moral decay. People need to go to church and find Jesus. I'm just giving advice from someone who knows well. You can make mistakes and have redemption. Jesus saves. But it seriously feels like there is an atmosphere where people here feel empowered to be predators of some sort, and it's unacceptable, unexcusable. anyone who holds this office and this title should not be engaged in behavior like that. It's very shameful. I'm embarrassed already that we aren't passing enough of President Trump's agendas, codifying his executive orders that he has signed. And instead, we're having to, like I said, clean house and take out the trash within our own ranks, both Republican and Democrat alike.
Yeah, and you're referring, of course, to Eric Swalwell, the Democrat from California, Tony Gonzalez, a Republican from Texas. Before I let you go, you've also had a little spat online with Dave Chappelle, arguably America's greatest comedian. This came after you did a selfie with him and fellow Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, you captioned it, just 3 people who understand there's only 2 genders. Now, he reacted by saying, I didn't want to say no in front of everybody, but I didn't know the phrase, I respectfully declined. So I just took the picture, and then she posted the picture before I could even get from there to the show, just instantly, like weaponized or politicized. So I got to the arena, and I lit her ass up for doing that. And she should never do that to a person like me. To which you responded, oh, I mean, come on, you're a comedian, be a little tougher, right? No, I thoroughly enjoyed this little spat, but, you know, what did you think of Dave Chappelle reacting so furiously to what you said? Because actually, on the issue of transgender women in, say, women's sport, for example, I think you are aligned, the 3 of you.
Yes, I was stating facts. And, you know, for Dave Chappelle to go on NPR and have a counseling session and say that he lit my ass up on stage, well, it didn't even make the cut in his special. So I guess it wasn't that good because someone cut it from the set entirely. I had actually heard about it. This was years ago. And a reporter had actually said his lines word for word. And yeah, it's a photo. I was stating facts. It was something that was very relevant and a topic that he brought up in that special. So I mean, for him to go and cry that, you know, 5'0", 100-pound Lauren Boebert intimidated him into taking a selfie with another member of Congress, and he, you know, wasn't strong enough to say no or decline. I don't know. You know, Dave Chappelle, I mean, he's been a part of my childhood. He's hilarious. I love his skit comedy. You know, he had Eddie Murphy's brother on, and it was like, I mean, it's just such a great show. All of his skits, most of his specials, you know, I have absolutely rolled hilariously throughout all of it. And, you know, it's always sad when someone that has been a part of your life in some meaningful way, you know, disappoints you, but that kind of ties it back to how we started. Don't put your trust in people. Put your trust in Jesus, because people will always let you down.
Very wise advice. Lauren Boebert, thank you very much indeed for joining me again.
Thanks, Pierce.
Well, let me turn now to my high-powered panel. Joining me are Anna Kasparian, the executive producer and host at The Young